As the original tagline for the film said, "Man is the warmest place to hide." And in the frozen Antarctic vistas of John Carpenter's The Thing, the only place to find man is Outpost 31. Today we take an in-depth look at the Defibrillator, chest chomp, in The Thing. In the early 1980s, director John Carpenter was a filmmaker on the ascent. Since his debut with 1974's Dark Star, he had directed 7 feature or TV films and reinvented the slasher genre with 1978's Halloween. Following the success of 1981's Escape from New York, Carpenter was ready to make his first studio picture.
Reach anybody yet?
The idea of producing a new adaptation of the John W. Campbell novella Who Goes There had been developed at Universal Studios by producers David Foster and Stuart Cohen for a number of years, with several different writers and directors, including Texas Chainsaw Massacre's director Tobe Hooper coming on board for a spell. But it was Cohen's idea to reach out to his former USC classmate Carpenter, and the director immediately keyed onto the idea of making a serious horror film about assimilation.
And of course the Thing is a metaphor for whatever you want to say. It's disease, could be AIDS, could be whatever, but it comes from within you.
The production soon hired screenwriter Bill Lancaster to write a new screenplay. He was fresh off a Writers Guild Award for a previous script, The Bad News Bears, a very different film about male bonding. The Campbell novella had previously been adapted by Howard Hawks for his 1951 film, The Thing from Another World. But Hawks had turned the story's shape-shifting alien into a Frankenstein's monster like Behemoth. Carpenter and the new production sought to produce a more faithful adaptation of the original story, and Carpenter's Thing would be able to take the form of any living being it came in contact with. That idea presented a myriad of possibilities and problems. Instead of just one monster, there would be several, and to create these creatures, Carpenter turned to 22-year-old makeup effects wonderkind Rob Bottin.
I actually just sort of burst in on this meeting, and he's going, "Who's this guy?" The dean, right? And I'm like going, "I'm your big fan."
Bottin, who would later do makeup and visual effects on films such as RoboCop, Legend, Inner Space, Total Recall, and Seven, and the Purple Wedding episode of Game of Thrones, was a protege of makeup effects legend Rick Baker, and had worked with Baker on the Cantina Band sequence in Star Wars. Bottin first met Carpenter during the production of 1980's The Fog, after he begged the director of photography to introduce him. Carpenter liked the kid and hired Bottin to play a ghost at the end of the film. Spoiler alert, apparently there are ghosts at the end of The Fog. Maybe it's like Ghost Fog, I don't know, I haven't seen it. In 1981, Bottin had his first major solo success with Joe Dante's The Howling, producing a werewolf transformation that rivaled the Oscar-winning work of his mentor on An American Werewolf in London. With his experience on The Howling under his belt, Bottin was ready to let his imagination run wild on The Thing. Carpenter paired him with storyboard artist Mike Plug to design the centerpiece effects sequences in the film.
Went walking back up to, Carpenter's office. He looked at me and he said, "Do you know how to do all this stuff?" And I said, "No." That was really the challenge of that picture.
Production began in the summer of 1981 on the Universal lot in the San Fernando Valley. To get the frigid look of the film just right, the production cooled the soundstage to 40 degrees, while the temperature outside reached as high as 100. While Carpenter and his actors filmed the scenes inside the Antarctic Research Station on the soundstage, Bottin and his effects unit began the long, arduous process of building the creatures in a nearby studio. To create the chest chomp effect and subsequent head spiderization, actor Charles Hallahan, who played the doomed Norris, spent a total of 10 days with Bottin and his effects team as they molded his face, hands, legs, and torso, going so far as to accurately recreate the hair pattern of Hallahan's chest on the fiberglass dummy.
Richard Dysart is an old pal of mine, played the doctor, the medical doctor. Came in that morning, I was already in the harness, and he said, "Put some clothes on that guy, for God's sake, it's disgusting." And he came running over, and it wasn't until he was right on top of me that he realized that was fake.
To achieve the shot of Dr. Cooper's arms getting chest chomped, Carpenter cut from Dysart plunging his arms into the fiberglass chest to a pair of fake arms affixed to a stuntman who was a double amputee. The hydraulic chest snapped shut, mangling the prosthetic limbs, which were made of gelatin with wax bones and rubber veins inside. With fake blood and gore flying, Carpenter and Botten knew that the audience would not notice that Dysart had been replaced by a stuntman with a prosthetic Dr. Cooper mask on. In fact, the mask was so realistic that actor Joel Paulus, who played Fuchs, thought the production had simply found a double amputee who looked exactly like Dysart. The subsequent shot of Norris's chest spouting viscera just before the thing emerges from the gaping hole was designed to be a single take. The prep time for that shot alone was 10 hours. But when cameras rolled and the viscera shot up, Carpenter yelled to cut. He said it looked like a fountain in Las Vegas. Botten and his team were forced to reset and try again, which meant hours longer for Hallahan strapped in a harness underneath the table. Luckily for all involved, the second try was the charm.
As Rob said to me, it's not like ordering pizza on the phone. You have to build it and create it. And sometimes it doesn't work.
And even when they did work, the things were a hodgepodge of rubber, foam latex, gelatin, creamed corn, mayonnaise, strawberry jam, and KY jelly. 5-gallon buckets of which could be found sitting around the studio. To make the creatures move, the production utilized a combination of techniques including hand puppets, marionettes, radio controls, wires, hydraulics, and pull cables. Making the movements look real was a difficult task shared by Botten's team and director of photography Dean Cundey. Carpenter wanted the thing's transformations to take place on screen live in front of the camera like a magic show. So Cundey set out to show just enough of Botten's creations without making the viewer aware of the seams.
You want the audience to believe the impossible. You have to give them as much possible as possible. If the audience accepts all of the other rules of the impossible, physics, gravity, light and shadow, whatever, then you can get them for the suspension of disbelief.
Achieving that suspension of disbelief was time-consuming and draining. In one instance, as tensions mounted on set over the time it was taking to capture an effects shot, actor Wilford Brimley, who played Blair, turned to his annoyed co-stars and said, "Don't you get it? It's all about the rubber man." But even the rubber man could lose his focus. To achieve the effect of Norris's head pulling off and dripping to the floor, Botten and his team melted plastic and microwaved bubblegum to place inside the rubber neck. The set quickly filled with fumes, but no one realized how dangerous the fumes were until Carpenter called for a flame underneath the camera for continuity's sake. When the gas-powered fire bar was lit underneath the camera, the prosthetic Norris body exploded in a fireball, and what was also meant to be a one-take effect had to be redone, eating up another day of filming. In the end, Botten worked 7 days a week for 57 weeks on the thing, frequently sleeping at the studio. When the film wrapped, Carpenter ordered his effects man to a hospital bed so that he could recover from stress and fatigue. But all his work was up there on screen.
One particular sequence, a tongue shoots out and it pulls across, turns over, it grows stalks and walks across the floor. When I saw that, I realized a great sense of relief. Because what I didn't want to end up with in this movie was a guy in a suit.
Sadly for Carpenter and the filmmakers, that relief was short-lived. When The Thing was released on June 25, 1982, America was in the midst of a love affair with a very different sort of alien life form.
Oh, God!
Released just 2 weeks prior, Steven Spielberg's E.T. was quickly on its way to becoming the highest-grossing movie of all time. Compared to cuddly E.T., the creatures in The Thing made audiences uncomfortable, as did the film's ambiguous, nihilistic ending.
Steven, I don't understand what this movie's about.
Some members of the cast also felt that Carpenter had favored the gore over their performances, with nuance and characterization cut in favor of what star Kurt Russell called the movie's ick factor. Critical reviews tended to agree, with many reviewers comparing Carpenter to a pornographer, because we hadn't yet started comparing things to Hitler in those days. The Thing opened at number 8 at the box office in its first week of release, and would only make $19 million on its $15 million budget. But the film has endured, partly because of its uneasy atmosphere of paranoia, but largely because of the ambiguity and gore that turned audiences off in 1982. In an era of CGI special effects, the film's tactile, analog gore stands out in its timelessness. The Thing is now considered a classic in its own right by film fans around the world, including those who would understand the plight of Outpost 31 more than most. Every year on the first full night of winter, the residents of Amundsen Scott South Pole Station in Antarctica screen The Thing, along with its 2011 prequel and The Thing from Another World, before settling in for the long, cold winter. That's it for Art of the Scene this week. We hope you enjoyed our look at The Thing. Such a seminal classic. Let us know in the comments below iconic scenes that you would like to see us do in the future. Subscribe to Cinefix. Come back for more awesome movie content. I'm Michael Trulli. I'll see you next time.